right, it's 1 o'clock, so we'll get on our way. Welcome everyone to our Healing for Wellbeing webinar series from the New Beginning Center. We're so glad you joined us. I'm Sean Baker, co-owner and executive director and your host. And before we get started, just a few tips of how we'll communicate with each other during the webinar. First off, you can move our talking heads anywhere on your screen for your optimal viewing pleasure. And then please use the raise your hand feature to let me know if you're having an issue that needs immediate attention, like you can't see us or you can't hear us. Please use the Q&A option for questions. Feel free to submit your questions throughout the talk as they occur to you. And I'll be behind the scenes gathering and organizing them. And we'll either pause and address them at that time or wait until the end if it seems more appropriate. We'll be using the chat feature. Feel free to use that to let us know your feedback. As I was saying earlier, this is the third of our first 3-part series of webinars, and always interested in your feedback of what you would like more of. I have a feeling we'll be doing a few more of these, so let us know that, and certainly share any resources that you have that might be helpful to all of us. And we'll also be using the chat feature to get your input at a couple particular times during the webinar. So if you want to practice, using the chat feature, just note you can send a chat to panelists and attendees or just to panelists. So you can be mindful of that. And then finally, we'll be recording today's webinar, and we'll send you a link to that in our thank you when it's ready. So don't worry if you miss something, you can always go back and have another look at it. So we're so pleased with the positive response we've received for these webinars. During this pandemic and subsequent global upheaval, we see this as a real opportunity to help explain what's been happening to all of us, to our minds, to our bodies, to our relationships, and to share tools that we can use for our own mental health, for our loved ones, and really for the well-being of our entire community. It's been through my own healing journey and those I've witnessed that I'm just so grateful to be a part of creating a somatic healing center for trauma in Camarillo, California. At the center, we offer, let me get over here a second. There we go. At the center, we offer an array of outpatient services and an intensive outpatient program for trauma and anxiety, all designed to heal your nervous system, restore reconnection, and restore resilience. We have an incredible team of practitioners as well, each of which bring their passion, their creativity, humility, and their unique talents as healers in their work with you. We've created a series of webinars and ongoing online support groups to assist you and others with tools for well-being during this time of crisis. And as you can see, today's presenter is Dale Ryder. She's an LCSW and has worked as a healer and spiritual teacher for the past, and therapist for over 25 years. I really feel so blessed with Dale's expertise on our team and the journeys that she took and we took to find each other last year. She believes that spirituality, family work, and relationships are at the core of people's struggles and offers her gifts of healing with an open heart. Dale is passionate about assisting others in reclaiming their authentic self through connecting with spiritual practices and accepting the vision that we are truly all on this path together. I really can't think of a better person to speak about and who embodies the healing power of love than Dale. Dale?
Thank you. Thank you, Sean. So glad to be with all of you today. Our relationships, I'm sure, are getting impacted as we speak, with sort of doing everything differently right now. Our world has shifted a bit. So I want to start off by honoring all of you, and we're going to take a more of this process that we're going to be going through is a little more about being proactive in our lives, so that we're not sort of falling into that reactivity with those that we love and with ourselves. So we're going to be going through that today, and that's why I wanted you to have some paper and a pen, because I'm going to have you really writing down some things that you can take a look at later so that you can go back through and really sort of look for yourselves where you've kind of begin to get into this reactivity that really takes us out of relationship rather than in relationship, and definitely takes us out of the space of love and really sort of plunges us into this fear-based place. So that's a little bit about what we're going to be going into today. So we'll move forward. And we're going to start off with this concept of emptying our cup and starting from beginner's mind. This quote comes from a Zen Buddhist that was working with a student, and the student was asking a lot of questions of the master, and the master finally says to him, like this cup, you are full of your own opinions and speculations. How can I show you Zen unless you first empty your cup? So we're going to start off by emptying our cup today. So I'd like you to close down your eyes, and this will be really brief, but I just want you to feel into this concept of emptying your cup. So closing down the eyes and getting your feet on the floor. Just feeling into your body this afternoon. Taking in that big, deep, beautiful breath. And letting it go. And following your breath in through your nose, down into the lungs, and back out again. Not changing your breath, just following it. And sensing your heartbeat underneath your breath. Your heartbeat, your unique fingerprint among all of the other heartbeats. And just feeling that connection, even though we're not together in a room, that we are all going through very similar things and very different things all at the same time. So as we empty our cup before we step into this space of sharing and learning and growing and stretching together, we come from beginner's mind. And one more breath. And let it go. And fluttering open those eyes. And coming back in. As we step forward here. Many of you may be familiar with the Four Agreements, and I know it gets kind of shared a lot out there, but it's really a beautiful framework and concept and way to utilize interacting in all of our relationships. So the Four Agreements are to be impeccable with your words, don't take things personally, don't make assumptions, and always do your best. So we're going to take a look at the first one. And when we think about impeccability, a lot of different things might come to our mind. So I'm hoping that we can use the chat feature to, when you all hear the word impeccable, what comes to your minds? Just when you sort of hear that word, spotless, think about being impeccable, perfect, mindful, intentional, great words. Love the book. I love it too. Ethical, beautiful. So we all sort of have some flawless perfection. We all have some different meanings for that. I love the one that just popped up from Donna. Say what you mean and mean what you say. I use that a lot when I'm working with family members. So we all have some, thank you all so much for that. So we have some different views of what impeccability means. And it's high standards from Stephanie. Thank you so much. So that it really is one of the most important agreements, and it's one of the most difficult ones to honor. So we're going to really work in your relationships from here forward, and you probably do some of this already, to just really work on being impeccable. And with our words, we have the power to create or destroy relationships. We're going to look at thoughts later, and really all thoughts are our words strung together in our mind. So being impeccable with ourselves, being impeccable with those we love, it's a really beautiful agreement to start with. So we'll move on to the next. And thank you all so much. That was exactly what we were needing with the chat. So taking things personally is the next agreement, and this one is hard to do. And when someone's not able to be in impeccability of their word, then it's really difficult not to take that personally. So we have to sort of do our own work. And I know with shelter in place, there's probably a lot of things coming up, difficulties within the family and with space, and or if you're not with your family. I'm actually alone here in California, and I'm not with my family. So that brings up a whole nother kind of slew of problems. But so really working not to take things personally right now as we're doing that interaction with each other. He talks about Don Miguel Ruiz, the beautiful writer of this book, and it's ancient Toltec wisdom that he shared with all of us. He says, personal importance is the maximum expression of selfishness because it makes the assumption that it's all about us. So it's hard to sort of separate when we begin to pick up on words and energy of other people. And so it is kind of hard to not accept that what they might be putting out there to us. So really working hard to not take things personally, and we'll move on to the next. And our lovely assumptions that we go into when we don't have information sometimes, or when we're kind of up in our minds, assumptions just start to flow. The problem with making them is we believe their truth. This person will never be able to A, B, C, or D, or I will never be able to, or I will always. We start using those words when we make assumption. And the beautiful quote, pardon my language, when we assume, it makes an ass out of you and me. And it sort of leaves people just kind of hanging, and resentment begins to build. When we're in unhealthy expectations, expectations then become resentments in training. And we're sitting there with all of that sort of angst and upset in the body, which Sean and Susan described beautifully in the last two sessions. And it begins to set up shop in our bodies. So we really want to work to not make assumption, and sort of the opposite of making assumption is to begin to just ask questions and get clarity and clarification. That's when we move out of assumption. When we don't have information though, so back to the word, when words are spoken sort of sideways, that can be really painful. And when words are withheld, that can be really painful. So when we're not giving anything to each other, that's the only place to go is into assumption. So we really want to be expressing ourselves always, but specifically in these times we're in as well. And my favorite quote, resentment is like you taking the poison and waiting for the other person to die. So we're sitting there with all of that, and they're going on about their day, and they may not even realize. So really working on the assumption is a beautiful tool. And we'll move on. And the last one is to always do your best. And Don Miguel talks about our best is different depending on our circumstance. I don't think he knew we were going to use this in treatment centers across really the world. I believe his books get used. But there's a quote in the book that says, your best will be different when you are sober, healthy as opposed to sick, and sober as opposed to drunk. And we can be drunk with many things. We can be drunk with anger. We can be drunk with depression. We can be drunk with chronic pain. We can be drunk with many things. So it's not just a substance, which that can do it too. But moving into this place that our best is going to look different. So we just do our best each day, and we do our best with each other. And he also talks about there are no regrets. And I know that we have them. So this process that we're going to walk through today will hopefully help you to sort of release regret, opening up from that heart space so that you can begin to interact with your loved ones and yourself. And he ends with, the human is the only animal that punishes itself over and over for the same mistake. This space of forgiveness is also a big part of moving forward with each other and forgiving self. So we'll move forward from there. So I work with people on this concept of snapshots. We take in new information on the right side of our brain, and we literally take a snapshot of it. That snapshot gets stored in our left brain file cabinet. And, oh, I don't have a volume control. If I move a little closer here, maybe you can hear me better. Keep letting me know if you can't hear me, okay? Perfect. So this concept of snapshots, that memory, which it's a memory but stored in a photograph, moves over to the left brain file cabinet. So if something happens today, we get activated, and that snapshot literally pulls out from our memory and comes in between, and I'm sort of putting my hand there as it literally comes in between the people that we're trying to connect with. It literally sort of moves right in front of our vision. Now, it can also be a physical sensation that creates that where that memory gets fired. So it can be your gut is a big space where the gut lets us know, and that old memory kind of comes front and center. Our heart rate might go up. We may begin to shut down, and we're going to look at these reactivities in a minute. The really, easiest way to sort of qualify this is to look at PTSD as far as a veteran. And I worked with veterans for a long time, and with PTSD. So if they're in an arcade and they hear a gunshot or a firework goes off, they literally they hit the floor, because they have moved back into that snapshot and they are no longer present for this moment. So we begin to work our way through our life and our relationships through these snapshots rather than being present for and a lot of beautiful teachers right now use, Eckhart Tolle talks about the power of now and being in the moment. And that's really, I believe, what they're speaking to, is when we're out of these snapshots and being present, we can connect, we can attach in a healthy way. So these snapshots become our avenue to experience each other when that's not really where we want to be with each other. So we're going to take a look at that and how those kind of fire. And in neuroscience, they talk about what fires together, wires together. So when your snapshot fires, then your thoughts begin to follow the snapshots. And this is a perceived threat, and this person is going to hurt me. This circumstance is going to hurt me. And it's really difficult to be present. So I know that we all have had things that happen to us, and we're going to move right into the life happens part of our chart. So this is where I'd like you to have your paper. Now we have a life happens right here in front of us. We are in shelter in place, and so you're having many opportunities of this life happens part of the chart. It's also events, we can call it. So on your paper, just anything you want to write down next to, like, write life happens, and anything that's sort of been coming up for you. It could be I'm home and I can't get space away from my family, or you're not sure of what's going to happen in the near future with your job, or your depression has really kicked up. So just, jot down some life happenings for you, or you did lose your job, just anything that you can think of there. Take a few minutes to do that. And as you do that, I'm just going to share a little story. Up in Alaska, they have these pipeline roads. And when trucks go over those pipeline roads in the springtime, they cause these gigantic ruts because the roads are wet up there. And in the wintertime, those ruts begin to hard freeze. And they literally have signs that say, choose your rut carefully because you are going to be in it for 50 miles. Well, our brain chemistry begins to do that as well. And our neural pathways begin to take us down these ruts that may not serve us in our relationships. So we're going to speak to that as we go. So life happens, these events happen, and then we pop into thought. And it happens quickly. Thoughts follow really just right after that event happens, our thoughts begin to go. So I would like y'all to share with us and write down for yourself some of the thoughts that might be coming up for you about yourself during this time. So in your chat, if we can. So thoughts about you, I am, or what will, I'm always doing this with my loved one, or, anything that's sort of coming up. If you could share just a few thoughts with us. I am a failure in life, not good enough daughter. I'm worried I'll die and never have touched my children again. I can't see, oh, you can't see. Is there something wrong with me? So much noise bugs me around the house. So these thoughts come flooding in that quickly. I am not lovable. My partner will leave me. Right? So it's, I'm terrified that I'm not a good writer. When will this all end? I can't wait it out. Lots of feelings all at once. So those thoughts come in so fast. I'm failing as a parent, wife, anxiety. What will life look like after COVID? Fears of abandonment. these thoughts begin to rush in, and it literally happens so quickly. And there's a beautiful writer called Mark Epstein, and he combines Eastern spirituality with Western psychology. And he talks about that in that moment, we literally become a thought without a thinker. We are no longer connected. We are not a wise mind when those thoughts are firing like that. We are a random thought without a thinker. And that really helps me to sort of stop. And we can challenge these thoughts when they hit us. We can sort of stop and challenge the reality of the thoughts. We can check in with others about those thoughts. We don't have to believe everything that we think. And I know they're strong. Our mind is strong, and it's, but we can challenge. So that is we're going to work later on really being proactive with all of this. But when these hit, you can challenge your thoughts. And then the next slide is feelings. So those feelings follow. Now, some of you were already labeled beautifully the feelings that were coming. I heard abandonment, but I'd like you to, on the chat, if we can just get, so when those thoughts come, what are some of the feelings that follow those thoughts? So the feelings of, I'm not a good enough daughter, helpless, anxiety, sadness, fear, loss, shame, abandonment, more shame. So those feelings come in quickly: hopeless, exhilaration, anxieties, inadequacy, and shame. Those feelings follow quickly, and feelings, an actual feeling lasts about 90 seconds, and that's from research. The actual feeling itself, now we know when we cultivate love and those sort of things, that lasts longer because we're nurturing that. But an actual feeling lasts about 90 seconds. Anything that comes after that is what the mind gets a hold of with those thoughts. So we want to honor feelings. Like when we're feeling joy, joy comes in, we share it, we laugh, we cry, and good tears. We energetically send that out. We just let joy sort of move in. And joy, does it move out? It does. It comes in, it moves out, and then does it come back again? Yes. And we don't chase after joy. We let it, I mean, we try to cultivate joy maybe, but we let joy come in and we let joy move out, and it comes and it does that cyclical piece. But with other feelings that maybe we feel aren't so positive, they come in and the body begins to hold on. And we'll talk about that in just a minute as far as our reactivity. The body holds on to the feeling instead of really allowing ourselves to feel the feeling, let it dissipate, let it move out, and it will move out, and it could come back again. I think the fear of it coming back really keeps us where we're locking down on it and wanting to do something with it. So thank you for those, for sharing that. So life happens, the thought comes in, the feeling follows, and quite often we find ourselves in reactivity. And I know all of you out there have experienced responding to your world. I know you have. If we've been here long enough, we have responded but often, a lot of times, we're in reaction. So some of the reactivity, and this is where I'd like you to really write down where you go, life happens, thought, feeling, where do you go in those times of reactivity? And reactivity is not very thought out. It's sort of that instinctual, old, Tara Brach is a beautiful psychologist, and she speaks of this, I think she calls it cortical looping, I believe she calls it. And we sort of stay in that cortical looping. And she does a beautiful talk, if any of you want to listen to her, on responding versus reacting. So write those down. Where do you go in your reaction? Some of these are just examples. Sometimes we do go into using substance. But underneath that using piece, there are other behavior that can take us out. It can be shopping. It can be hyper-focused on productivity, beautiful. OCD, cleaning. Yes, all of those. Mine are a little more, the ones here on the chart are kind of based back on some addiction treatment that I've done a lot of. Anger and alcohol, projects just keep coming. Absolutely. So on the outside, we're not kind of registering that we're in reaction. Isolation, keeping busy. They may appear like, oh, I'm okay, but it really is from that reactive place, right? Defensiveness, right? And we're going to talk a little bit here when we pop over of those are probably the very things that you're going into with your loved ones and internally. Like I think I told you, I'm alone right now, and I even do this stuff inside my head. And this who am I? Jenny just noticed she gets noise sensitive. So all of that falls into that reactive category. Thank you so much for your examples. That was perfect. So in that space of reaction, and we'll go on to the next slide, we go into this mechanism that we have in our body called fight, flight, or freeze. It's a defense mechanism, and it's supposed to be there. You've heard of people being able to lift a car off of a loved one. In this space of fight, flight, or freeze, there's no room for rationality. So the rational mind is not with us. So in that space of trying to save a loved one, a person's able to lift that car. In a normal resting state, the body can't do that. When that car goes down, that person could go into shock. They could have physically wounded themselves. So in this state, we're not in rational mind. We sort of are that thought without a thinker. So I'm going to go to flight first. So we have this beautiful, and Sean didn't know when he picked these pictures, but my sweet horse that I had looked exactly like this horse, which is wonderful. I am a horse girl, and my little gal, Fancy is her name that I had. If she was deathly afraid of plastic bags, and you would think a big horse, a small plastic bag, but a lot of horses are afraid of them. If a plastic bag came through our arena, she would literally run herself through a barbed wire fence and be wrapped up in bleeding over a plastic bag. That is how strong flight is. Fight, and the flight behaviors that you were sharing with us were perfect. That is sort of the isolation. Alcohol, substance definitely can be a flight mechanism. You could be going away from your family and your loved ones. That's all sort of that flight reaction. Sleeping a lot is a flight reaction, right? And then we have fight. And I had a little Yorkie, Violet, and her instinct is a fight mechanism. So even if a perceived threat were 50 times bigger than her, she is going to try to fight it because that is her go-to. That is her instinct. That is her survival instinct. So we too, as humans, go into fight or flight. Freeze is a little bit different. It kind of operates from a different mechanism, but you stop. You literally, this is where people can disassociate. They're not able to maybe find words. They're numb. I'll hear people use that word a lot, of being numb. And then often, maybe after you move out of freeze, you might go back into fight or flight. So this mechanism is active in us. And what we're wanting to do is move out of reactivity, because reactivity is meant for times of life or death. Now, is this virus, is there a potential life or death to it? You betcha. Is there a potential life or death if you're an addict, and if you keep using, could there be that potential for life or death? Yes. But we have got to calm the system down enough so that we're not chronically in that space of fight, flight, or freeze. Because what it does is it floods the system with cortisol and adrenaline. And that's when we are flooded. We are flooded with those chemicals, and there is no room for reactivity. If I tried to step in front, and I know I'm using animals instead of people, but if I tried to step in front of my little horse when she was running for that barbed wire fence, I would get run over. If you were trying to move in front of your loved one when they, or if you're doing that yourself and someone else is trying to stop you, when you're in that space, you're going for the flight, and you're going to get there. It feels like at any cost to the system. Same thing with fight. If I tried to step in front of my little dog, I would probably get bit. And if you're trying to shake someone out of freeze, it doesn't really work so well. So this is where I want to talk more about being proactive with this, although we can challenge these in the moment through what we talked about of challenging thoughts, honoring what you're feeling and letting those feelings move, and then hopefully not being in that reactivity as much. So remembering this mechanism is meant for times of life or death, but even in those times, we can calm that system down. We go into fight or flight when someone doesn't love us in the right way. We go into fight or flight if we feel like we're not doing our best at a job, at a presentation, at school, with our family, if we feel like we're failing somehow, which some of you all shared in your comments. So I'm sure many of you have been triggered. This mechanism has been triggered in you during this time, but in many times throughout life. We get triggered on the freeway. That's where road rage, those sort of things come from. So we want to save this mechanism for when it's truly appropriate and we need it, instead of being in it on that sort of consistent, almost daily basis sometimes. So we'll move forward. So the way to be more proactive, now we talked a little bit about challenging thought, challenging feeling. When we're in reactivity, you can try to move yourself out. Sometimes when we're in it, it is like that rut and we're following it for 50 miles. But when you get a little more aware, which you all are doing today, just by even talking about this, we can begin to sort of calm the system and move out of that reactivity. but a more proactive way, which is really how I like to work, and I do this in my life. I wouldn't share with you anything that I hadn't personally done myself, and I use this throughout all of my life. My snapshot of my family, I knew that my fear of staying in my snapshot was more than my fear of moving forward into my emotional well-being. So I began to do this work for myself, and I've created this. I mean, it's got combinations of cognitive behavioral and all sorts of other sort of therapies, but this is really truly what I set in motion for myself. So at the top of our chart where we had the life happens, we can't always change the life happens. We can't change what's happening right now as far as the restrictions. We can do things for ourselves within our homes, within our work environment, with the people that we love, but the life happens, we can't change parts of that. So right underneath that on your chart, on your paper, I'd like you to write the word needs. And I'd like you to write these 3 categories for yourselves. And these are my 3 categories. You all can add some other things for yourself. But we have physical needs, emotional needs, and personal needs. And physical is sort of, it's an easy one to go, oh, I know what I need physically. I need food, clothing, and shelter. So I would like you to write those down, but the physical, what does your physical body need? So I would like us to do a little bit of input for that. So what do you, that might be different than someone else. Everybody's physical needs aren't the same. So any physical needs, if you could just give me a few in the chat. So we talked about, just the basics, which we can, easily think of, I think, of food, clothing, and shelter. And all of those are being impacted by the shelter in place. And we also have, physical needs, sports, big one. I'm a big workout girl, exercise. We need rest, movement at work, so not to sit so much in front of the computer a lot, stretching. Sean uses a beautiful one of yawning. He told us about that the other day and I loved it. Sleep, so big. Kindness, compassion, physical touch, dance, you betcha. So we have to we have to be clever right now. Intimacy, walking at lunch. We have to be a little more clever with the physical needs, fresh air, because we're not able to do some of those things like we used to. I'm a big hot yoga girl, and doing some of the stuff online is just not the same as 98 degrees and sweating. So everybody has different physical needs. Thank you so much for those. And then we'll pop down to emotional. So we need our physical needs met. Emotional needs. What are some of your emotional needs? And those are all getting impacted too right now. Emotional is a little harder to define for people sometimes. We quite often go to just, I need love. And which we do, and I need it too. But, and quite often, emotional needs, we don't know what they are sometimes until they're lacking connection, beautiful, until they're lacking, and then that can kind of show you. So when you get triggered, it's like, oh, I really need respect, validation, beautiful, feeling supported, understood, connection with team and family, being able to talk in person and have support. It's not the same in Zoom meetings. So true. right? Oh man, I just felt a rush with all of that. Thank you so much, because that's truly being impacted right now. So every area of need, which is hard to be met in normal times, is really getting impacted. Compassion, non-judgment. So beautiful. Thank you. So emotional needs. And then we have personal needs. So remembering to write these down for yourself. Personal is anything else that sort of sets us on fire for this life, that gives us a sense of peace and connection. Some people put hobbies in this place, and it could be, definitely. I kind of consider myself a spiritual geek, and we just see meditation time in the morning, absolutely. But I'm a spiritual geek, so I want to study everything, the Bhagavad Gita, the Bible, all of those things. And if I don't have those, I really don't feel as fulfilled. Oh, here's some beautiful ones. My own time and space, online synagogue, volunteering, transition from home to work time. Art, right, is a beautiful music. Anything like that. That's that personal space that really, garden, beautiful. Being out, growing, nurturing that way. Going to the library, growing herbs and flowers. Beautiful. So we can't just have one area of need met. We've got to have a little bit of all of them going at the same time. And Sean, we can move forward to the next slide. They did a study, and I love this little monkey, because the actual study that they have, the pictures are just, they're heartbreaking. So I love this little monkey. He's a happy monkey. So in the study, and it was done throughout the 50s and 60s, they did quite a bit of these. And I know that sounds like a long time ago, but it really just so, it works for today. But they took a rhesus monkey, which has about 94% similar DNA that we have, and they put it in a cage. So it had its physical need met of shelter, and they fed it, and it had its little fur, so it had its clothing, and so it had the basic needs met. And they watched another group of monkeys that had each other, they had touch, they had community, they had rest time, they had play time, they had purpose. They purposefully, made their environment. So purpose is another one we didn't have on our needs piece. But so this little monkey started to not do so well. And I'm not a big animal fan of doing research that way, but it really does, it's very telling. And the little monkey started to not do so well. Was it surviving? Yes. But it wasn't reaching the milestones. It couldn't pick up things as quickly as the other little monkeys that had all of this. So then they put in a mesh figure, and I looked back at the study, it had this really odd little, almost looked like a computer face on it, but it had fur. And in those pictures, the monkey is just clinging to this mesh figure with fur on it. So it started to get that emotional need met a little better. And it started to do a little bit better, but it still didn't gain weight the way the other little monkeys were. And once again, didn't reach those milestones. So the researcher was actually trying to prove that the only reason that the monkey was connected to mom was because of the food factor. And the study really kind of put a whole kibosh on all of that because it just wasn't true. The monkey needed touch. The monkey needed connection. The monkey needed playtime and all of that beautiful things to thrive. And the phrase that they coined from that study is actually failure to thrive. So if we're getting up, going to work, come home, go to bed, or now get up, get in front of the computer, do a few things and go to bed. If we get into that rhythm of just surviving, we're not going to be connecting and coming from that heart place with the people that we love. So needs being met is truly, truly important, and a more proactive way to come at this than a reactive way. Now, we deal beautifully at New Beginnings with the reactivity of the body. And when we release those things from the body, and if you all were in Sean or Susan's talks, you got some of those beautiful tools. So this is a little different tool. It's a little more proactive rather than reactive, but we need both. And we can challenge along those ways. We can truly challenge thought, let ourselves feel, and move out of reactivity into this space of thriving. So I think we have another slide. And these are just some examples. And, you know, and Sean started off talking about, I look at all of this as spiritual. I think any time that we set out on a healing journey or to look at ourselves deeper, how more spiritual could that be? And when we're working to sort of bring ourselves back home to self, rather than being in the snapshots or the body reactions, how more spiritual could you all be? That is your true spiritual fingerprint. So I just encourage you all to check in with your charts, work to get those needs met. I'll support in any way I can through emails. I'm not sure how Sean's got that set up, but I just hold space for all of you. I'm also an energy worker, so I will put you all in my Reiki bowl and really hold space for you to get your needs met at this time. It's truly, truly important. And these are some of the principles that can come out of that. And we'll all look different, but these are just some things that, you know, we could cultivate. So I think we'll open it to question. Does that sound like a good time, Sean? Or
Yeah, this is great. We've got about 7 minutes for questions. So thank you, Dale,
thank you.
As I hoped and as you promised and delivered, for speaking about the power of love and really how it shows up in our everyday life.
Oh, thank you.
As we're all trying to navigate, you know, this way of being together and while being separated.
And
so,
it is so much about love, or, you know, I know there's so many beautiful teachings that talk about that. And I know we have way more feelings, but they say fear or love, you know, that we come either from fear or love. And I do get that on some levels for sure.
Yeah. Choosing which to lean into. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah.
So we'll take any questions for Dale and put those in the Q&A part. And also, if you've got ideas for things you'd like to hear more of, you can, I guess, put maybe that in the chat part to us so we can kind of keep track of planning our next series of webinars. So one thing came up here. What are some practices we could do to connect to explore the emotions and painful memories in our body? Great question.
Yeah, it's a great question. So those, when they fire, so sensing them first, just knowing, oh, okay, I am sensing something right now. like if your gut, I used to just think my gut hurt a lot. But when I really started to sit with that and really question, so it's like doing an interview with yourself. I really interviewed myself a lot. And I went down my chart. What am I? What are those thoughts? You're having that physical sensation, or the snapshot is flaring, but we don't just have to, we can begin to sort of tease that apart. So what thoughts are you having? What feelings are following those thoughts? Go right down that chart that you have. And what might you be doing reactively? And when you do that, like when I started to do that more and more, that actual memory began to fade. And of course, breath work and all of those beautiful tools are really good. But when we can literally go down that chart, you'll start to see, wow, I can really question these thoughts. I can question my feelings, and I can definitely move myself out of reactivity. And what might I be needing right now? So it's sort of like a little interview, that paper, and you can do that anytime.
Great. And this question from Jenny, fairly similar. In the step between life happens and thought, do you recommend that we attempt to change the thought? And if yes, how do we do that when trauma happens?
Yes, challenging the thought is, I tend to be, I really want the needs met, but as you tease all this apart, like I had to do this for a long time to even figure out what my need was. So yes, challenging the thoughts, writing those down and looking at them in front of you, questioning the reality of that thought, questioning maybe where it came from. Checking in with someone else is always just a beautiful way.
And I think, getting, if the question, Jenny, you're saying is like, how do we do that when trauma happens? We are in that state of reactivity. So the tools we've been talking about of how do I get my nervous system kind of back into a more calm place where I'm not feeling an immediate threat. And then I can begin to do the thought challenging process. And then
so those pieces that Sean, I don't know if were there different people on each webinar for the most part, or?
I think some the same and some new folks. So yes, Jenny says the nervous system hijack is what I was asking. Yes.
Yeah. And that's where, Sean did some beautiful pieces of the breath work, and anything that sort of does bilateral stimulation. So like you can even snap your fingers from right to left. It is such a simple, you don't have to go by, they have equipment that does bilateral
the tapping.
And tapping, but you can literally just snap your fingers from right to left as you're going through, going into breath. And that the activation really is to let right and left brain begin to talk, so that limbic brain is not running the show, which is the fight, flight, or freeze. So yeah, anything that sort of does that bilateral stimulation is beautiful to calm the system.
And do we ever go from life happens to feeling versus life happens to thought?
We can, yes. But thought, if you slow it down enough, there's usually a thought first. Now, I think sometimes people tend to be more feelers or more thinkers. And I tend to be a feeler, and I thought that the feeling came first, but when I slowed it down and really teased it apart, there was usually a thought that came first. And my overall theme that normally popped first was, what did I do wrong? It's like and I think we all have like a theme, a ticker tape of a theme. And when when I started to tease that apart, I was like, that is almost always my first thought. But a great question. But I do think the thought comes first, but I'm a feeler. So I was like, oh no, I feel first. But
Well, and you know, in the talk we did before, to me, I think some sort of sensation happens, and then
right.
we interpret it both in terms of cognition and in terms of emotion, and that's where we can, I think, have the most power to kind of keep scaring ourselves down one neural pathway, or make a correction to snapping or something that gets out of that rut, as you talked about. So.
And as you do this, you will build a new neural pathway. You are doing that. When you begin to change this up, you'll build new neural pathways and new neural nets, and that muscle will become stronger than the old rut.
Mm-hmm. Wonderful. Okay, so just to, Dale, thank you so much for your expertise, your presence, your just again sharing of your gifts with us. We're so appreciative of being together. And everyone, just to let you know, we're continuing our free online drop-in support groups. We've got one on Wednesdays for eating disorder recovery support from 7 to 8. One on Thursday from 1 to 2. Really kind of, we birthed this one in the presence of COVID to give folks resources and a place for reconnecting. You know, it is via Zoom. That's the best we can do, but how can we reconnect there? So our clinical director, Angela Cooley, is leading that one. And then on Fridays from 6 to 7, we've started Queer Space for LGBTQIA community support. So all of the links are available at our website. So because they're drop-in, you can just go to the website, get the link, and then sign on when you'd like. And if you haven't signed on, if somehow you heard about this and aren't signed on to our e-newsletter, we certainly invite you to do that. And again, welcome thoughts and ideas for things going forward of what you find helpful, again, just in your own life and well-being, and what might be helpful in, you know, what kind of keeps you sustained. And one of the things that we're thinking about is how do we move back into, you know, what's appropriate physical time together. And fortunately, we are able to offer equine therapy. And so we're starting to make plans for using that modality, being that it's outside and is socially distant, as perhaps a way that we could begin to offer some in-person services that are absolutely somatic based. So we're thinking about offering a webinar on educating folks about that, but we welcome your ideas. And again, we'll be sending you out a recording of today's, and we'll also include the links from Susan's webinar the first week and mine last week. So you'll have everything, I hope, that could be of a resource to you and others. So thank you again, everyone, for joining us.
Blessings.
Yes. Bye now.